You function at a high level almost effortlessly. You get the praise, you get the accolades, but privately, you know there's more. There's something God put in you that you keep pushing to the back. You call it a business, but you've been treating it like your side chick. It's time to stop stalling and start building without sacrificing the life that you love or the stability of your job. Hi, I'm Jateya Jones, and this is the Confident and Courageous Clarity Podcast, where corporate creatives learn to do both, be the blueprint, and finally bring that God idea to life. Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome to another edition of the Confident and Courageous Clarity Podcast. This is my first on the go pop-up, but I'm here with the one, the only, Brie Carroll.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So where's the book?
Okay, so this is the book, All Things Epic. I'm so excited about the book, and I might just take over the podcast because I am also a listener of the podcast. And what I would really like to share, not so much about All Things Epic, but the plan that made All Things Epic a reality. So, a little bit about me for those who do not know me. I've been on the podcast before, but hello, I'm Brie Carroll. I'm a civil engineer, a mom, a wife, an entrepreneur, an author. Hello, somebody, an author, right? But one of the things that I have benefited not just from a friendship with Jateya, but from her coaching and her process, a plan to win. So let me give you a little backstory and paint the picture. Once upon a time, I was doing the most and doing too much. And what I actually realized was I got in a season of burnout, if you will. We'll call it burnout.
Yeah.
But also it was a shift of trend in season. So I identify it as burnout. I think in real time, I think we were both communicating being sick of us, right? Then what happened, those were those signs that were popping up in our bodies, in our lives, that was like, hey, a shift is happening. And for me, I was not sure what was going on, what that looks like. So I had written a manuscript for a book, taking my thought leadership from the event side of things. And I know this is actually something that needs to be expanded to design your life intentionally and aligned. But because my body and life and everything else was shifting and pulling me forward, a lot of things imploded at the same time. Yes. You were there to see it. Lots of betrayal, lots of identity crises and things like that. And at the time, I had taken these steps and transitioned fully out of my corporate position. In hindsight, I wish I actually had not done it.
You know, I had that thought the other day, but we're going to talk about that.
Correct. In hindsight, I feel like I should not have done that. And the reason why I say that is because I love the season I am in now. Like we love to say, with more ands. I get to be an engineer and I get to be an author. So the reason why I'm saying I appreciate, and this might just be a love on the coach podcast, but the reason why I'm saying the plan to win truly works. This book is a testament to the plan working. And here's why.
I
did fight the process. I did. So if you join us and plan to win, you might be a fighter too. But 9 times out of 10. Here's what I realized though. When everything was falling apart, when I was grasping to figure out what my identity was, as I was transitioning back to a 9 to 5 an engineering supervisory position, and that I looked in the mirror and I was like, I would like more ands. And those ands actually looked like being an author. Now, I promise you, I went to plan to win mostly just to check it out. I had no intentions of really committing to to completing the book. But what I found is in the process, the way Jateya walks us through it and breaks it down, it makes it feel very attainable. And as someone who still is in corporate, I would say I am a multi-passionate, if you will, creative, also using a science and problem solving, like the having a plan was really, really beneficial to me, and it allowed me to step out and develop something that was sustainable. So it brought efficiencies to how I worked, and it didn't feel overwhelming. Whereas before, the way I was doing it, it felt very all or nothing. It felt very like there was a whole lot to do, and I became overwhelmed by that. And that also impacted how I showed up in that previous season. But with the plan to win, I was able to identify these small details that I could check off that would continue to let me move towards progress and completion of the book, putting the book out, and even now having the book in my hand, which is amazing. And that was in two.
Yeah, so December and March.
So 2 quarters, I was able to finish the book, self-publish the book, and it launches on Saturday, May 1st. But in 2 quarters, I was able to promote and finish the production of the book. And I think that is just a testament to having a plan, having support, being in community, and with someone who can affirm your creativity, who can affirm you staying in your corporate position, someone who can affirm you utilizing your thought leadership in a way that parallels your leadership in a workspace. I think that was really valuable for me. So I just say that to say this book would not be here without Plan to Win. So,
well, 1, thank you. 2, I love that you're here. 3, this podcast is being recorded on what, the 28th, 29th?
Yeah. The 30th.
The 30th.
This is the last day of the month. Eve. Look, this is the eve.
And so I had the thought the other day too about, I don't know if I really wish I would have left corporate, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, I do realize too that where we are now would not have happened without it.
That's true.
That's true. As they always say, entrepreneurship is the most personal development journey you're 100%. Ever going to go on. And because we took that step, it shifted a mindset that a lot of corporate creatives don't embrace. Right. I love working with corporate creatives because that's what you are.
Exactly.
But it takes a whole different mindset to be like, this job is not as secure as I thought, so I can do and. I'm not locked in, I'm not a slave to, I'm not indebted to.
Correct.
Let me stick my pinky toe in the water of something outside of, but I don't have to go all in and quit if you don't have to or want to.
I don't have to, right.
You can do and. And so I'm thankful for this part of the journey, but which is also why I'm also thankful for having the community and the support.
Correct.
Because even though I was the coach,
also supported,
because she would light a fire under my behind at any given time. And so knowing that community is important to get through either way it goes, because it is like accountability as well. Because you got to show up and report, because we're gonna be like, and what about you had said, right? And so I am super excited.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I will say, big picture for those who are interested in all things epic, it is the CARE blueprint to design a life with purpose, impact, and community. So when I think about this body of work, the framework that I did, and even how it complements the message that you have here, think of it as the drawing set. So I'm an engineer, like I mentioned, by nature. This is the drawing set. This is the set of plans, and that is what this book will walk you through. It'll walk you through getting the big plans. But what is not in the blueprint, right? That's where Plan to Win comes in. That is, when am I buying these nails? How much lumber do I need? Depending on what you're building, right? It is the little nuanced things. What store do I need to go to? If I don't know who do I need to know? So, right, you are going through that in Plan to Win. So this book, I absolutely think is a great way if you are like, you know what, I don't even know what my big picture is. I don't know what alignment looks like for me. I don't know how to get more ands into my life, even though that may be what I desire. Oftentimes people just have this blanket statement of like, I want more, I feel called for more, but we also are called to less stress, less anxiety, less pressure, less misalignment. And that's what all things epic is about. It's about alignment. And I will say, for those, if you are already on board for Plan to Win, you may want to take a look at the book. Check it out. The link.
You are the blueprint.
You are the blueprint.
But this helps walk you through the blueprint
Absolutely.
of like really thriving and having that life that you desire. So it's not like they go hand in hand. You need the book.
Do.
It's not a if, it's an and.
It's an and. It's an and. So if I could give 3 takeaways just from like this conversation, I think some lessons learned, and you correct me, edit as we need to. The first one I would say is, before you join the bandwagon of having to be all in on and quit your corporate, really sit with what is aligned for you, right? And I think that is, like I said, all things epic is about living a life that is aligned and designing it intentionally. So my first takeaway is you asking yourself, is going all in on one direction or the other really what you want? I love you asked the question about freedom, right? And I think if you could break that down for them a little bit, like what is the difference? And you have to answer that question for yourself. Somebody else can't answer that.
Okay, so I always ask, do you want freedom or flexibility? And most people always answer freedom, but they're thinking flexibility. So if the example I always give is, if you work from home, you have flexibility. So like you can put a load in the laundry and still do your job, but you don't have technically freedom. Now, if you have a complete remote job, then you might have a little bit more freedom because you can work from wherever you want to work from. But do you have set hours? Whereas the thing, your 9 to 5, you may have some flexibility, but you never have complete freedom and control. When you work for yourself, you have complete freedom and control. You work the hours you want to work. I'm a night owl. She get up before Jesus rose.
Exactly.
So she'll text me and be like, it's almost 10 o'clock. Are you talking? Because she knows 9 times out of 10. I went to bed at like 3, so I may not be talking at 10. But, or I start talking at 10. And so like, that's because I have that freedom to create my own schedule, stick to my own schedule, where she is now back in corporate. And so she has more flexibility and a little bit more freedom than she had previously. But it's more flexibility than freedom. And so once you understand like what you really want, and even looking at your definition of success, because definitions of success have changed from when I was just in corporate to where I am today, to you leaving and going. And so you really have to sit and ask yourself these questions so that even though you are naturally the blueprint, when you're designing your blueprint of life, you can design it accordingly and accurately instead of based off preconceived, or as I say, inherited ideas and conceptions. Because climbing the corporate ladder, I talked to somebody today, she's like, when I first started this job, I wanted to be director. She was like, y'all can have that.
Correct. Exactly. And that's what I love about the way using this idea of a blueprint. In the book, I parallel building a bridge, right? And you're creating your overall blueprint and your design plan. But in the book, I also talk about a concept called redlining. And what that is after you have your drawing set, as you are building, you are going through and making corrections because maybe the spacing that you previously measured doesn't quite work with now that you have other things going in, right? You make adjustments, or there was a change that a stakeholder had, like your family may have a change, your health may have a change, your life, your capacity has a change, your job has a change. Exactly. So you need to redline in. You still have your blueprint, but in each season, know that you're going to have to redline and make adjustments to the blueprint. And sometimes you might outgrow the entire blueprint, and then that's when you can go back to the blueprint. You mentioned definition of success changing. In this season, my definition is EPIC, which stands for experiences with purpose, impact, and community. So that is my North Star guiding light for all of the decisions that I make. If it is not epic, it's a no.
Yeah.
And I think that has brought me a lot of alignment.
I love that. And so, you know how my brain works. I just had like 5,000 different thoughts at one time. But like, going back to, so I had a conversation with another client, and she's like, I know I'm not there yet, so I'm just going to do this. And I was like, build a house for the family that you're planning to have.
Yes.
Not the size that you have now, because it's just you and a dog, right? And so when you were talking about redlining, I'm like, so many people, when they go into the vision or building the vision, they're like, I know I'm not there yet. And I'm like, you can build it and populate it later, but at least you have the capacity to grow into that.
Right.
It's so much harder to build and grow. And
100%.
because growing by itself and stretching
It's
is a
a
whole
lot.
nother.
Because you need capacity to rest. You need capacity to sit with the changes. You need capacity to, and also the maturity to say, although this might be successful, this is not exactly what I want, right? And that's
because you have
hard.
to break through the shoulds, because you're living based on, well, I should, because these people are gonna, and these
100%.
people, and you're building stuff based on everybody else and not you yourself. And so it's just so much that happens when you're building the vision that, as I say, the God-given vision, it's this download, and you're like, well, I think things should be done this way. Nobody has ever done it this way,
Yeah.
but this is what works. And I'm called to build this thing. And so you got to break through all of the other headway just to get to that piece. And so then going into the plan, I talked to some project management people, and they're like, well, it's a work breakdown structure. And I'm like, it's more than that. Because with the work breakdown structure, you're saying, yes, I need to go to Whole Foods. But is it the Whole Foods on the east side or the west side? Because one carries something that the other doesn't. And so you really have to go into detail. And some people are like, well, that goes into the whole SOP. No. It is a plan. And once you have the plan, when life likes, you can call audible and adjust.
Correct.
And so that's why I love her book. It talks about some of the phases she's gone through. And how life is life, and how you still can work through that to have this epic life.
Yes. Despite. Exactly. I think that's a huge second takeaway. If I could stop anything, it is just, you mentioned getting away from those shoulds.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is going to be a challenge for all of my corporate creatives, because it is just so challenging to do all the time. Thank you so much. It is a challenge to break up with them shoulds.
Yep.
And I think you should consider breaking up with the shoulds as your second big takeaway here. Mm-hmm. And know that just try it, because you can always redline. You can always adjust. You can always go back and make iterations. Mm-hmm. And we have to be willing to make those iterations in our lives. And we have to follow the alignment to see if it really is aligned, right? As opposed to just living with shoulds and never trying and never knowing.
So just giving yourself permission, because you really can't do what you want to do when you want to do it how you want to do it. Girl, I'm trying to do a touch screen. But we've been locked into living our lives based on somebody else, whether it's corporate, whether it's the school, whether it's your parent. And so giving yourself permission to test and tweak, or redline in her words, right? But getting rid of the shoulds and being patient enough with your nervous system to give yourself grace to actually step out there and do something different, even though it's scary.
Yeah.
And then see how it feels, and then go from there, because that's the only way you're gonna get to the epic. Mm-hmm. Is if you allow yourself to fully live out. Because for most of my corporate creatives, our bare minimum is amazing to everybody else.
I'm so glad you said that. That is actually a quote that I have in the book from Coach right here. But I think the way we put it in the book was, without trying, we can poop out gold flakes.
Without
trying. And I think that is something that the multi-passionate, the person who can do a lot of good things, different things well, mm-hmm. right? Your 50% is somebody else's like 90. And I think that is why we need to be aware of where do we choose to direct our energy, to direct our purpose, to direct our passions, and make an impact, because there is a option there to continue to add those ands, mm-hmm. where you can do a phenomenal job on your 9 to 5 and still be able to show up and have something that you are building that will sustain you when there are gaps, or we talked about flexibility, working for the government, I love my hours of going in super early and coming out. And because Jateya, of course, will give you pushback and be like, is that really freedom or flexibility? And I'm like, oh, well, if I don't want to be here, I would just take leave. Well, in building what I believe in on the side, that I believe my purpose and my impact and my work, the thing that I'll get a well done from on the earth here, I believe that I'm able to just take off. If I have a speaking engagement, I will just take off, whether that be paid leave or I can take leave without pay.
That is
it. And this creates the monetary balance to where I do not feel the difference, because I figured out what is enough for me money wise to hit the goals that I want to hit, to do the things that I want to hit. And I love that people are just like, we just want 6-figure everything and we just want $1 million everything. And it's like, yes, but does your life have capacity, and the person that you are now have capacity for you to hold $1 million anything or 6-figure anything in your side business or the thing that you are building? You have to be real with yourself. And that's another thing I talk about in the book, careful consideration. You have to carefully consider the things that you're just saying that sound good, that everybody else is talking about. Is that right for you? So the point here is to live a life that's aligned.
That part. Because, also people think that when you have this side thing that it's meant to replace or compare. It could just be there so that it's actually built to hold you in retirement. Or if you choose to say F you, because that's what I did. So true. And at the time it was built to hold me, but things change so much. But to everything she just said, I just second, and I'll leave it there.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for agreeing to be on the
I'm
podcast.
excited. All Things Epic. Again, it is available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can get it on Kindle or my site. And I'm just really, really grateful for everybody out there who is considering doing Plan to Win. I highly encourage you to do that. That might be the push that you need so that you can live all things epic.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
If this confirmed what you've been feeling, stop putting it off. You already know what God told you to build. If you're ready to move in obedience, book a clarity call. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, you have the clarity, you have the call. Now it's time for the courage.